Hi everyone, welcome to my channel again. So in the earlier part one of my Chiang Mai videos, I had explained why my husband and I decided to pick on Chiang Mai, why we think it's will be a great place as a second retirement home. In this video, I want to touch on more practical matters such as visa, transferring money, buying properties or renting properties. So I know using a UK passport or even a Hong Kong SAR passport, we can go to Thailand as a tourist with no problem. We don't need to get any tourist visa. And using our passport, we can stay in Thailand for 30 days. I believe that if we want to extend that, we can easily do that on shore in Thailand for another 30 days. So that would give us 60 days in total, which is all well and good if we're there for a long holiday. But we're thinking of living there, then having a 60 days time span is not enough. It's a real pain having to leave Thailand every 60 days and then come back in again for another 60 days, right? And also the expense of doing that. So that to me is not going to work. So I decided to look at the visa options. So obviously there are all different type of visas, such as marriage visa. So one is to marry a Thai citizen as a spouse, or there's a business visa, but neither of which really is open to me. So then that left me with really two viable options. One would be a retirement visa, and the other one is an education visa. Like I said, right, I think the two visa options that's most relevant for what I'm talking about to going to live in Chiang Mai would be the retirement visa or a education visa. I think for people who are 50 years and older, the retirement visa is definitely worth considering, because the criteria for that really isn't too onerous. You must be 50 years or older, and you must be able to demonstrate that you have a monthly pension of roughly $2,000 per month, or you need to deposit around 25,000 USD in a local bank account. I guess that's to show that you're not going to be there with no money, right? And plus you do need to take out local medical insurance. And I hear that is a relatively new requirement, I think since October 2019, since October last year. I guess they have had too many foreigners running up the medical expenses there and they're not paying. So that's been a requirement for the retirement visa. Now, for those of you who are not yet 50, then education visa would be the next choice, I guess, right? But you can study. You can study almost anything, right? You can study the Thai language, you can study Thai cooking, Thai massage, and obviously in my previous video I had mentioned that Chiang Mai actually has tons of universities, and Chiang Mai University itself run many courses in English, so that is also definitely an option. Now for both type of visa, the number of days is that, if you successfully gain the visa, you will get initially a single entry for 90 days. And after that, then you can apply for a 1 year visa, which allows for multiple entries. So in terms of that, the number of days it gives you, either one would give you the same thing. I guess with the education visa, right, you do incur additional costs, because obviously if you're studying, you need to pay for the course, be it learn a language course or a cooking course, right? There is that additional expense, whereas for retirement visa, you really don't have that. So the next question really is bringing large sum of money onshore to Thailand. Thai government actually there is no limit on how much foreign currency we bring into Thailand. So long as once we have the foreign currency in Thailand, we need to deposit it into a foreign currency account with a local bank. However, they are quite concerned regarding Thai baht. So if we wish to exchange the foreign currency and hold Thai baht, and we're going to be in Thailand for an extended period of time, we really should open a non-resident Thai baht account with a local bank. And then once we exchange the the currency into Thai baht, we need to deposit that into the account. Now, I have heard that opening a local Thai bank account can be quite tricky. But that's no different, I believe, in most countries nowadays. I mean, with anti-money laundering regulations and know your client requirements, I think in most countries now there's heightened sensitivities to opening bank accounts. So just as a warning, I've heard that it can be a little bit tricky. One advice I have read is that if we can bring large amount of foreign currency into Thailand, we should make sure we keep all the paperwork. So for instance, if we're transferring large amount of Hong Kong dollars to Thailand, let's say to buy a condominium, then transferring the money to Thailand, I believe there is a document called TT3. So we need to make sure we keep a copy of that. And also once it is onshore in Thailand, we need to exchange that to Thai baht to buy the property. And there's also paperwork regarding the foreign exchange. So you need to make sure you keep that as well. Because I believe you need to show all those documents to the lands department before they're willing to change the title of the property. And I think it's also good practice anyway, right? To keep all those documents even after you've bought the property, because eventually when you come to sell it and you want to take out a large sum of money out of the country, there's also questions regarding the source of funds and etc. Then at least you have the history of where the money came from and etc. Right? So I have had some friends asking me, right? So if we're going to live in Chiang Mai, how much money do we really need per month? I've said that it's cheap living in Chiang Mai, but how cheap is it? And that became quite tricky when I was researching that, because you look at different people spending pattern, so their lifestyle can determine their cost of living can be very, very different. So in the end, all I did was to use my husband and I as an example, as a base case, right? This slide of sample living cost is very, very subjective. This is typically what I imagine my husband and I would need to spend per month living in Chiang Mai. The most expensive part really is the rent. But even there, right, I actually based it on a real example I found on the estate and website for our 2-bedroom rental, which I would happily, based on the photos, live in, I think. So that works out to be about $400 per month. So utilities here, again, that can be very, very, that can fluctuate quite a lot, I think. Let's say, right, if you have the aircon on 24 hours, 7 days a week, then that would be much higher than what I've budgeted here, right, $100 per month. Because we don't typically use aircon all the time. I quite like having a bit of a breeze in the morning and having actual clean, regular air instead of recycled air in the morning. And groceries is the next major outgoing item, because I do like food. I mean, I like cooking, I like eating out. So, but that doesn't include any alcohol, because we don't drink. I've read online that booze can be quite expensive in Chiang Mai, especially imported alcohol. So bear that in mind if you like your wine and your beer. So you may need to add to that. So again, this is purely as a reference point, and also because I had some questions from friends asking me. So here it is. Really, $400 for a 2-bedroom condominium, and it's a nice condominium as well. The one I use for reference, it's really not expensive at all. But nonetheless, right? Let's talk about accommodation, right? So in Chiang Mai, in the last decade or so, right, there's been loads of developments and investments in properties. There are houses. If you drive through Chiang Mai, especially in the suburb, there are housing estates being built all the time, and they can run from really, really super luxurious to more modest housing estate. And the same goes for apartments, condominiums. There's some that looks like fancy hotels, and there's some more modest kind of modern building as well, right? So depending on your taste, depending on your budget, I'm sure you can find whatever you're looking for. I think for most people, especially folks who have always lived in an apartment, they might fancy living in a house for a change, with their own garden. So Chiang Mai is really a good opportunity to do that, because renting a house in Chiang Mai is very reasonable, especially if you're looking a little bit further from the town center. You're not sure whether you really like living there, despite all the research you've done. The sensible thing would be to rent first, right? Because that gives you the flexibility of changing at a moment's notice. You can easily sign a short-term lease of 6 months to 1 year on a rental, and then you can see how much you like living there. Philosophically, I think my husband and I, we just tend to lean towards buying more than renting as a way of building equities. Moreover, we do have most of our investments in Hong Kong and in the UK. So the idea of having a little bit of diversification elsewhere is actually really quite appealing, especially after I've looked at, did some number crunching, and find that the yield in rental yield in Chiang Mai is actually pretty good. So that's why we decided that we should also look at buying a property locally as well. But again, later on, right, I'm going to take you guys to look at one of the website of the local agent, the agent that we've been working with, and to really walk through what kind of things I look at and how I calculate the yield, etc. It's all very simplistic, but at least this is, shows it might be helpful to some people anyway. So some of you might have heard, right, that it is impossible to own land in Thailand if you are non-Thai, and that's true. Thai law prohibits non-Thai from owning a piece of land there. But at the same time, though, we also hear of stories of people actually owning houses, buying houses in Thailand, right? And there are a couple of ways going around it. I've read that you can set up a Thai company to own the land, for instance, right? And then you become a director of the company, controlling interest of the company, or you can own the property sitting on the piece of land that can be yours. So you own the freehold of the house, but the land is owned by a Thai company, and you lease the land from the company on a 30 years lease. And then once that 30 years is up, then you can extend that for another 30 years. So that's another way around it. Or another method I've read is that, obviously, right, if you're married to a Thai national as a spouse, then just buy the property, buy the house, buy the land in your spouse's name. So these are all methods I've read online where a foreigner gets to buy a house and a piece of land it sits on in Thailand. But none of that really appealed to me. I just find that a little bit, there's uncertainties there still, right? It just doesn't appeal to my husband and I. Rather, we've read that we can own a condominium outright as a foreigner, and that makes sense once you understand how the logic behind it. Because a condominium is just one unit of a whole building, and so long as that building, 51% of the units are owned by Thai nationals, then the remaining 49% can be owned by foreigners. And so long as I'm buying the unit as part of that foreign quota, the 49%, then I actually can own that unit 100% as a freehold. That means eventually I can even leave that as an inheritance for our kids and etc. So to me, that just sounds much more attractive to us. Also, when we spoke to the agent, the local agent, he actually, and I asked about the yield if we decide to rent out a property, and he gave me some indicative kind of return. He said that for houses, you're looking at around 1 to 2% net yield, but for condominium, especially the older properties, you're looking at about 6 to 7 or 7 to 8%, depending on how much you bought the property for. So again, just from a numbers point of view, the condominium just makes a lot more sense to me. But having said that though, I mean, as you will see later on when I take you through the different website, looking at the website and looking at the actual properties where I chose one to do as a quick calculation, I actually got 5% yield for houses, for a house, and 7% for a condominium. So the house return was actually higher than what the agent told me. So again, I mean, these are all just numbers, you know, as a reference. When you actually come to rent it out, you might have slightly different numbers, especially now that we're in a pandemic or coming out of a pandemic. So I kind of explain why we personally would lean towards condo as opposed to buying a house. Even if I was renting, I don't think I'll rent a house, right? I just don't want a hassle of, you know, cleaning the swimming pool or getting someone to clean the swimming pool. And, you know, even silly things like, you know, all those windows, you know, it looks very nice in the picture, but imagining cleaning the windows, all those windows everywhere. And, you know, why do I want to have a 2,000 square feet house when it's just hubby and I, right? Just the two of us. And also, you know, being out in the tropics, there'll be lizards, right? I mean, how often now am I going to have that big patio door open to look out at the view? I mean, to me, I'll go for the condo every single time. And moreover, I want a condo in city center. I want to be close to everything, and that's the whole point of it. I want to be close to the old city so that if I wanted to, I can just go down for a snack, you know, for a pot of noodle, or if I just want to have a yoga class, I can just walk down to a sala for my yoga class. So I don't want to be out in the suburb. The other reason why we would rather go for an older condominium as opposed to newer ones. Because like I said, right, if you go through Chiang Mai now, there are tons and tons of new developments, you know, new houses, new condominiums being built all the time. So notwithstanding what the agent told me regarding the yield, because older properties are just cheaper, right? I mean, new properties are like new cars. As soon as you buy it, you lost some of that value, right? You can never sell your new car for the same price you bought it, even if it's the next day, right? You lose something of that value. So the same goes for properties, right? You buy a brand new property, you can't sell it the next day for the same price you bought it for, because, you know, there's a margin there that has gone to the developer. You're not going to recoup that for a few years, quite frankly. The other thing is, right, is that, you know, some people have told me, well, you can buy off plan, which will be cheaper. Yeah, I get that. But then there's also risk to that, right? I mean, you also hear horror stories of developers not completing the project. You know, they run out of money before they can complete it. And there's no history there. I mean, you know, they might have built a really beautiful property, but what about the running of it, the management of it, right? There's no, I mean, I don't know how it's going to go. Whereas if I buy an existing condominium, maybe let's say, you know, 20 or 30 years old, I can see whether it's been well maintained, right? I can see from the exterior, I can see from the lobby when I walk in, I can see from the gym or the swimming pool, you know, whether it's been well maintained, whether the management fees been used as it should have been, right? In the upkeep of the property. So again, the practical side of us would much rather go for that. Plus the fact, we don't mind older properties. You know, having lived in England, we lived in houses that are, you know, a couple of hundred, you know, 100 years old, over 100 years old. So long as it's well maintained, I see no issue with that. I don't need uber luxury, right? Fancy lobby and, you know, fancy gym. You know, I just need functional. I need the location to be right. So this brings me more or less to the end, obviously, right? Like I said, I'll attach a video clip at the end of, you know, going to the Perfect Home website. If you found this video useful and helpful, please subscribe to my channel, as I would love to have you. And also, please give it a like and share if you have other friends who might like information on Chiang Mai. Bye-bye. So I was looking online for information, and I found this website initially just through some property blog here, Keith's property blog, and they were talking about, you know, 5 top reasons Hong Kong investors like Chiang Mai. And once I found this article, I started looking more at locations, right? Because I quite like the fact that they talk about the different locations. They give you a little bit of a rundown on the different locations within Chiang Mai. So here they talk about the Niman area, the modern area, and then there are sort of the out of place, out of town suburb. A kind of brief overview. You can click in and read more, obviously, in each of the areas. I also did read up quite a bit on the different condominium buildings. So of course this is not a exhaustive list because Chiang Mai has built so many condominium developments there in the last 10 years. But here they do talk about some of the major ones, some newer ones and also some of the older ones. So I did spend quite a lot of time looking through the different well-known developments within Chiang Mai. And I looked at all the newer ones as well as some of the older ones as well to get a good sense. And also obviously use Google Map quite a bit as well, just to get my bearing in terms of the old city, which is where I tend to use as my starting point to get my bearing. And once I started looking through read up on the different articles, and I also looked at the property management, obviously in case we do buy a place and we rent it out, we're not going to be there full time initially. Then we will need a property agent to look after the property. And again, here I like the fact that they gave to me to be very sound advice and very kind of down to earth information. So this is an area where I would suggest you look at because I do think they give quite good summary in terms of location and also the condominium development. Next, I said I would explain very briefly how I tend to look at yield as a kind of comparison, right? And again, this is just my very simplistic way of doing it. And I know I'm going to get some people coming back in comments with some complicated formula and to say that I'm looking at it all wrong. That's okay. So this is just my way of looking at it. Okay. So for instance, right, I wanted to get a sense of if I buy a place and I let it out, how much will I get in terms of yield, so I can do a comparison. So here I looked at houses for sale. So let's start with houses, right? So I looked for a house for sale, and then if you come down here, I wanted to get a comparative. So I got lucky here because they actually had the same house for sale. I guess the owner is looking to sell or to rent. So this house here is for sale, right? So I've got the sales price and all the details below. So the sale price is 6.9 million baht. And also the same property here on the website is also, that's for sale. So hold on, let me get it up. House for rent. So the same house is actually also up for rent. Right, so it's this house here, right? So if you look at the pictures, right, you can tell and read the description, it's exactly the same house. So here you can see the same house is the asking price for rent is 38,000 per month. And so for sale is 6.9 million. So I'll just do a quick calculation in Excel. So this is the house here, so 6.9 mil. So the reason I timed 1.1 is that I figure, based on my sort of prelim research, I added the 10% because of the legal costs and whatever cost and taxes that I would need, that would go into buying a place. It works out to be roughly 10%. So that's why I timed it by 1.1 here. And this is the rental. So the rental, as shown in the website, was 38,000. But again, I kind of reduced that a little bit because I figure I deducted 10% for management fee, and also I read somewhere that roughly the income tax on the rental income is about 5%, and that's why I timed it by 0.95 to get a net income, right? So this is the net income at 32,490. So for the annual net rental, I will just time this monthly amount by 12, okay? And then for the yield, I would use the annual income rental amount and divide it by my sale price here, right? And I get a 5% yield. So that's for a house. So I did the same thing really for a condo. So if we go back here, so the one I picked So it was a condo for sale, right? I picked the same building. I managed to find one that's for sale and also for rent in the same building. So this is the one, I think, PP condominium, right? So this is being sold. The asking price is 690,000, right? And then you can see the size of it is 1-bedroom studio, and it's for a 29.7 square meter property. So if I look at the condo for rent, so I also found one for the same building, same size. So PP, let me find it again. Oh, I think it's here, right? This is it. An expensive studio rent. Yeah. Right. So again, right, they round it up. So 30 square meter, 1-bedroom studio, and this is 5,000 baht. So it's not exactly the same unit, but it's in the same building, same size, and then so I plugged in numbers here, right? So again, for 690,000, I again timed it by 10% to include the legal costs and the transfer price. And in terms of rental, here, I found a different unit. It was for 4,900, but anyway, it's roughly the same. And then again, I reduced it by the 10% management fee and also the 5% tax to get the annual rental. So I timed that by 12, and then the yield is again the annual rental amount divided by the sale price to get 6.6%. So higher than the house, for the house. So really, that's how I came to do my calculation, and this is the same kind of methodology I'll use for most time when I'm looking at properties to determine roughly the kind of yield I'm looking at.